Hi everybody, welcome to my kitchen once again. Today I have another painter's palette for you, and the artist we're going to talk about today is Mr. Jackson Pollock. And for those of you who don't know who he is, he's very probably the most famous abstract expressionist painter in America and possibly the world. He's also known as the art world's first superstar. So he was kind of like the rock star of painters in his day. So we're going to talk about him today. And the dessert we're going to make is inspired by one of his paintings. It's the painting called Automatism, number 30, which he painted in 1950. So and the dessert is, I'm making gluten-free salted caramel chocolate chip cookie bars. And once we make them and we drizzle all kinds of gooey goodness on top, you'll see why it looks like a Jackson Pollock painting. But I'm getting the oven warmed up, so while we're waiting on that, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Pollock. He was born in 1912, and he had kind of a troubled childhood. His father couldn't hold down a job very well. He was an alcoholic. Pollock was the youngest of 5 boys, and they lived in Cody, Wyoming. So he considered himself a real cowboy. You know, he was from the Wild West, and that definitely influenced his art at the beginning of his career. His first name really is Paul. Jackson is his middle name, but he thought Paul wasn't cool enough, so he dropped that part of his name and was referred to as Jackson the rest of his life. And so he moved to Arizona around the Grand Canyon in his early teens and 20s. And that's where he really got his start in art. He was interested in abstract expressionism, and he really was influenced by Native American culture and artwork, as well as some other Western painters. So in the 1930s, we see him creating these works that are real moody and kind of strange, but have a Native American feel and definitely abstract. He wasn't going for realism at all. And so this happened for a few years. He struggled to really find his place, and art was a spiritual thing to him. It wasn't a concrete sort of method. He felt like doing the art was his therapy or whatever. And so he wasn't famous at all and didn't really get his start until a woman known as Peggy Guggenheim took interest in him, and he was actually commissioned to paint a mural for her new townhouse. Now, if you don't know who Guggenheim is, she's, really quite famous in the art world. Big supporter, sponsor, investor in the arts, quite a wealthy woman. And so she saw something in Jackson and said, I need you to paint something big. And so he ended up creating this mural that was 81 inches high and nearly 20 feet long. And it was gigantic. And I will show it to you later in this video, but it's very abstract, and he didn't even give it a name except mural. He called it a mural, and it was 1943, and people saw it and critics loved it, probably because it was gigantic and interesting and different, and so that really started off his career. But the dessert we're going to make today is based on his drip paintings. What really got Jackson's career going was his drip paintings. Now, some of you might be familiar with the term paint pouring, or you've seen drip paintings and abstract stuff where you splatter the paint all over the place and just kind of, cover your surface. It's really been quite popular on YouTube to watch paint pouring videos, and there's something therapeutic about it, and I enjoy doing a nice paint pour. But Pollock is one of the first to actually kind of use this technique, and it wasn't a thing. Everyone thought painting had to be with a brush and a plan and to sit there and focus on your subject matter. And to Pollock, the oven's ready. To Pollock, there was no subject matter. He laid the canvas out on his studio floor, and he used enamel paint that he thinned down, and then he would just pour it or drip it with sticks all over. It's all over field piece of work. Very abstract. Like I said, no subject matter or whatever. And what's cool about Pollock's technique is he had to have been doing multiple colors at the same time, so he's probably using both hands, because when art critics and scientists and stuff analyze his paintings, they find that the paints are layered over the top of each other, but not like first a layer of white and then a layer of black. It's actually like intermingled. Sometimes the white is underneath the black. So they had to have been crisscrossing, and there's movement. They had to have been applied in a way that it was simultaneous. And he did not have an assistant or anything like that. He did all the paintings himself. So that's a really cool fact to know about him when you do see a Jackson Pollock. And if you actually want to view the man himself creating paintings, there is some documentary footage that you can find. Photographers were very interested in Pollock and his process, so they actually recorded him. The technology was there that they could do some documentary films. There's also a very interesting video, or not video, but movie created about Pollock, and it's actually called Pollock, and it stars Ed Harris. So if you want to see a film interpretation of Jackson Pollock and his life, I would recommend that one. But Jackson is really the first painter to do this exclusively. Sometimes he used a brush, but he grew disinterested in that. He felt like painting was a spiritual process and didn't need subject matter. It just needed to be done. So that's what he is known for. And like I said, he became really famous. He married another artist named Lee Krasner, and she is the one who really worked very hard to get Jackson's name out there and to get art critics and galleries to look at his work and say, he's on to something here, could be amazing. She was tireless in her promotion of his work, so really he has to thank her for that. Unfortunately, Jackson never really got over the struggles he had in his younger life, and they continued into his adult life. He struggled with depression, alcoholism, very extreme emotions. So he would work, continuously for a year or two on painting all the time and exploring his methods and his artwork. And then he would fall into a slump and just do nothing but drink and mope. And it's rather unfortunate. His wife, Lee, said that he was the most intense person she knew, and that any emotion he felt 10 times stronger than anyone else. So if he was sad, he was really sad, and if he was happy, he was elated, So that's rather unfortunate. And then, so he didn't live very long. And actually in 1956, so he was in his 40s, he was driving drunk, and he ran his car into an oak tree and killed himself and another person, and died instantly. So sadly, his personal life was rather tragic. He did, his fame remained, though 6 months after his death, there was a memorial show for him, a review of all of his work, and he was you know, just incredibly famous. So yeah, a little bit sad of a sad life, but his paintings are interesting, especially the really large ones. The bigger his work, the more of an impression it makes. And so that is what Pollock was known for. And so I will talk to you a little bit more about his work specifically after we get the cookie bars baking here. So I have all my ingredients laid out here for our salted caramel cookie bars, and once again I'm making them gluten-free, so I'm going to use Bob red mill flour. I'm also using baker's sugar. It's an ultra fine sugar, but cookie dough is pretty forgiving, so if you have regular sugar at home, I'm sure you can probably just use that and not have to worry too much about that. But the first step of the recipe is that I need to melt my butter and mix up my sugars. So I'm going to get those ready, and then we'll make our dough. So I've got my butter melted and my sugars, vanilla, and egg in the bowl. And I'm going to use my little hand mixer here to whip it up nice and fluffy before I add the flour and other dry goods. Because that'll give me a nice fluffy chocolate chip cookie dough. Now I'm going to add my dry goods. So I need a teaspoon of baking soda, and I need half a teaspoon, I believe, yep, half a teaspoon of salt. I'm just going to do about half. And I need a tablespoon of cornstarch. And then for the flour, 2 1/4 cups. So there's one. Two. And 1/4. So I have my dry ingredients in the bowl, and I'm just going to use a regular spoon to stir it up into a nice dough. And after I get it stirred up, I'm going to add my chocolate chips. So now I'm going to add my chocolate chips, and you can pick any, flavor you want. You can even put some caramel chips in the cookie dough if you want, but you're going to make a caramel sauce, so it might be a little too much. But I decided I'm going to use white and semi-sweet chocolate chips because I want all the different colors of a Jackson Pollock painting. And I'm just going to put about half the bag in the actual dough and save the other half to melt for my drizzle. So, you can measure if you want, but I like to just go for it. And pour the chips in there. More so that we can make our dough. So we have our nice crumbly cookie dough ready with the chocolate chips thrown in. So the next step is to get our 9-inch square baking pan ready, and I have a piece of parchment paper here that I'm going to place in it because I don't want the caramel to burn to the side of the pan, so it's just easier to cook it on parchment paper. But I'm going to take half
half the dough and lay it in the bottom of the pan and save the other half for the top. And just a little side note, gluten-free cookie dough is always pretty crumbly. So if you are making this gluten-free, you'll notice it has a little bit of a different texture. You can, of course, make this recipe with regular wheat flour, and then the dough will be stickier because that is what gluten does. It holds dough together. So there will be a slight texture difference if you do decide to make this gluten-free. But anyway, the next step is to lay it in the bottom of the pan, half of it. Okay, so your pan should look like this, with half the cookie dough pressed into the bottom on top of the parchment paper. And then we still have some left over here for the top half. The next part of the recipe is making your own caramel sauce. Now you can buy caramel sauce at the store if you want to skip this step. But we're going to make some homemade here in my little pot. And I got some brown sugar, the rest of that stick of butter, some sweetened condensed milk, some light corn syrup, and just a little bit of salt so that it has that salty taste. So the important part about this is getting your ingredients in the pot, and then it is going to cook and boil, and you need to constantly stir. So I'm going to have to keep a close eye on it and keep watching it because I don't want it to burn. So now I have my nice homemade caramel sauce in the pan. And I'm gonna pour it on top of the cookie dough that's in my baking pan here. And I'm gonna aim for the center. I wanna try to stay away from these edges because, like I said, it'll burn on the edge. So we wanna keep it more towards the middle. Now that I have the caramel sauce poured on, I did save some of it because I want some drizzle for the top of the cookie bars. But I'm going to kind of make a cookie sandwich now with the rest of my dough. I'm going to spread it on there carefully and get ready to bake it in the oven.
So while our cookie bars are baking, I thought I'd discuss again the main reasons why Jackson Pollock is important in the art world. And he's really responsible for some innovative ideas at the time. And now they may seem kind of like, oh yeah, everyone does that. But like I said, he was the rock star, fresh and new, in the 1940s. Pollock is important because of his large mural-sized canvases. You know, people would paint murals on walls possibly, but he was first to say, why can't the canvas be huge? Just gigantic pieces of work. And then he really liked the idea that painting does not have to be representational. It's an immediate visual image. So there's no subject matter. It's just you see it and it exists and it's art, and you can enjoy looking at it or get a feel or emotion from seeing it. But there's no frame on his works. He does not frame them. There's no main focal point generally. It's just a big optical field. So he also, because he wasn't pushing subject matter, Pollock is one of those artists that was really the first to just number his paintings, or he was a big fan of the Untitled. So when you see a work and it just says autumn number 30, it's because he made it in autumn of that year, and that was the number of the painting. just like the giant mural that Peggy Guggenheim commissioned. It's called Mural because he doesn't want people to see the title, see the artwork, and then see an image, see something specific. He doesn't want the viewer to be told what that artwork is supposed to be. And this comes to this idea called automatism. And Pollock was actually really into this. He thought painting was a spiritual thing, but he also thought you should be able to paint without thinking. And he really experimented with that and got deep into the psychology of it when he was doing his drip paintings, because he thought it would just be something natural, something spiritual that just happened. You know, no planning, no forethought, nothing. Just went ahead and painted. So he's a very interesting artist. His works are not, you know, the ones that I personally love the most. You know, I wouldn't say he's my favorite, but he was important, especially in American art history. And it's sad that he had a kind of a tragic life, but he definitely is famous. People really love him. And I hope you have a chance to look at some more of his work and maybe view some of those videos and see the man in action. You could even try a Jackson Pollock style painting yourself if you wanted to. It is kind of fun to just throw paint around and not think about it, to see what happens. But we're waiting for our cookie bars to finish baking, and then we'll do the final drizzle on top, which is the real artwork, or I should say the real thing that makes me think that this dessert looks like a Jackson Pollock painting. This is the mural that Jackson painted for Peggy Guggenheim. He claimed he had a vision of stampeding animals beforehand. Again, it's only called Mural. This one is known as Red Composition and was recently sold for $12 million. This piece is known as Full Fathom 5, and it's a collage of sorts with keys, coins, and cigarettes embedded in the oil on canvas. This is the piece that we are basing our dessert off of today. Again, large canvases unframed laid out on the floor to do the painting. This piece belongs to the National Art Gallery of Australia, and they bought it for $1 million. It is now estimated to be worth $100 million. The Deep is one of Jackson Pollock's last paintings. I like it because it's very profound. People think that it really shows what he was feeling in the last days of his life.
There are the salted caramel cookie bars. Nice and fresh and hot out of the oven. And now that they're baked, I'm going to melt some extra dark chocolate chips, white chocolate chips, and then that leftover caramel sauce we have. And we're going to drizzle it all over the top of this thing to make it look like a Jackson Pollock painting. There you go. That's a lot of chocolate, a lot of sugar, but I think it definitely has a Jackson Pollock feel to it. Now we do need to let the cookie bar sit for probably about 30 minutes before we give them a taste test, just so that all the gooiness can set up. So I want to thank you all for joining me in my kitchen again for this Painter's Palette episode. I hope you enjoyed learning about Jackson Pollock, and that you get a chance to make some of these delicious cookie bars. Remember, they're kind of crumbly. The longer you let them cool, the more stable they'll be. But I think this would make like a fantastic topping for like vanilla ice cream, especially if it was warm. So you'd have like a caramel cookie dough ice cream thing.
But it's time to taste test a chunk here. I'm just gonna break a piece off. So this is definitely an ooey gooey mess. It's really good. So again, thanks for joining and watching this. I hope you get out there and make your own desserts. And if you have a chance to explore Jackson Pollock's artwork, it's worth doing. If you get to see one of his really big ones in person, that's pretty impressive. Otherwise, I hope you all are well and happy, and we'll catch you some other time.